Hello everyone, this is PK Entertainment and we are back again, and we're going to have to report on the very sad news of the recent announcement that iconic and legendary actor Sean Connery has sadly passed away at the age of 90 years old. The actual cause of his death has yet to be established, but it has been reported in a statement that he was feeling unwell for some time and he sadly passed away peacefully in his sleep in the Bahamas. Now, for me, he was one of the true cinematic icons of the screen. You have certain actors who compel you to watch them on screen through their performances, and you have other actors who simply have that natural screen presence, that natural screen charisma. You're just constantly glued to them onto the screen, whatever performance they're in, whatever style or whatever character that they're playing. And for me, Sean Connery was one of those typical actors. I could literally watch nearly every film that he's in, regardless of how good or bad the movie, as long as he's there and he brings his own individual personality. I think a lot of the times I look at his movies and I see it more as it's just Sean Connery on screen rather than the individual character that he's playing. As I mentioned before, he really brings his own personality to the screen, and a lot of the time for me, I think that's enough for me to really be compelled and to watch whatever movie he was in. And it's very rare that you have actors, it's really only a handful of actors that have that screen demeanour about them, that truly screen aura that just compels you to watch on the screen all the time. And Sean Connery definitely had that. He was one of those truly iconic and cinematic legends on screen. He was born in 1930 and his career started really early, way back in 1957 with minor roles. But of course, his most iconic role was that of James Bond from the Peter Fleming novels, bringing to the screen one of cinema's most iconic protagonists. Many feel that James Bond is perhaps the most iconic cinematic hero within cinema, and I would find it hard pressed to argue with many of them. I would definitely put James Bond at the very least in the top 3 or the top 5 of most iconic screen heroes. And despite the fact that many actors over the years who have played James Bond, I've liked pretty much all of their interpretations. For me, Sean Connery's version was the benchmark. That was the quintessential James Bond. That was the one that had the physical presence, the laconic, very arrogant style about him. He had the swagger, he had the confidence, he had that real imposing nature about him, and it felt natural. I think a lot of other actors, sometimes it feels forced that they're trying to play the more outlandish, very confident personality, but for me, Sean Connery always just had that organic feel to playing James Bond, and you never really doubted his conviction and the way he played the character. And he was the one that really brought the character really to that cultural status. Sean Connery's version that really brought it into the main fold within mainstream culture. He of course starred in overall 7 films as James Bond, the first one of course including Dr. No back in 1962, and then he continued that momentum going ahead with From Russia with Love, later on with Goldfinger and Thunderball, which are huge box office hits at the time, and then he continued also with You Only Live Twice, Diamonds Are Forever, and Never Say Never Again, which was the last appearance that he made in the early 80s. Now, so many other actors have struggled to impose themselves outside of playing James Bond, but Sean Connery was that unique personality. He was the one that really was able to break out of the character and produce substantial roles and great movies outside of playing James Bond. It was really the 1980s when he came to the forefront and was able to build on substantial films outside of James Bond, and especially in the early to mid 90s when he really became a massive box office star. There are so many films outside of James Bond that he made a truly impression on, but personally for me, the standout ones were The Man Who Would Be King, starring him and Michael Caine. The Anderson Tapes, I can remember way back in 1971. That's a very brisk, entertaining crime caper. We also have The Hill, a very compelling and very intense war drama from the early 60s as well. of course, with Highlander in 1986, co-starring Christopher Lambert, dealing with the Immortals, a very outlandish adventure. And then we go on to the true uber classic, The Untouchables, 1987, his iconic role as Malone, supporting Elliot Ness in taking down Al Capone. It's a dream movie with a dream cast, and Sean Connery's performance really does propel the story, and he has great chemistry, particularly with Kevin Costner, who at the time was a up and coming actor, yet to follow through on his own superstar status. But Sean Connery is magnificent in this role, and this was very famous, of course, because this was the role that earned him his Academy Award Oscar for Best Supporting Actor. He followed that up a couple of years later in 1989 with Indiana Jones and the Last Crusade, another iconic role as the father of Indiana Jones, who again is one of cinema's most iconic screen heroes. And the chemistry again that Sean Connery was able to generate with Harrison Ford really provided the magic for that movie, and it's a brilliant performance for him. And again, it shows his versatility, because for a lot of his roles he's very much of a strong personality, and I think it really showed a lot more of his more subtle skills and his more comic timing. It's a fabulous performance in a great film, and of course Indiana Jones and the Last Crusade was the highest box office grossing film of 1989. He then moved on a year later to have another big box office hit in The Hunt for Red October, where he plays a Russian government spy, and it's a very tense submarine thriller directed by John McTiernan, who also directed Die Hard and Predator as well. And it's another great performance from Sean Connery. Many people kind of criticised him for his intended Russian accent, but like I said before, he was one of those actors that had such a green screen charisma about him. It didn't really matter the accent or the characters that he played. He literally just retained his own Scottish accent and personality for the most part. We later go on to 1992 in Medicine Man, when it's Lorraine Bracco, when they're both scientists trying to find the cure for cancer. We go on a year later in Rising Sun in 1993, when he plays alongside Wesley Snipes in a very typical crime thriller. I can remember watching this film way back. It was very average overall, but again, Sean Connery once more displays a good chemistry and workability with Wesley Snipes. We go on a couple of years later to First Night in 1985, when he played King Arthur alongside Richard Gere. And then we go on to, for me, another uber classic, In the Rock, released in 1996, when he plays Colonel Mason, somebody who was a British spy who was captured for harbouring government secrets in the prison of Alcatraz, and of course the terrorists go on to take over Alcatraz, and Mason, being the only person being able to break out of Alcatraz, has to help the Special Marines trying to break back into the prison to take out the terrorists. And it's a fantastic performance from Sean Connery, really again showing what a screen authority he is. Again, great chemistry alongside Nicolas Cage and Ed Harris. And this for me was one of the great roles, because it showed once again that despite being back then a truly established movie star for decades now, he was still able to find contemporary roles and still maintain that screen presence amongst the mainstream audiences at the time. It's a fantastic, brilliant film, The Rock, Michael Bay's best movie, and for me, I still regard The Rock as probably the best action film of the 1990s. He then moved on a couple of years later to the crime thriller Entrapment, starring Catherine Zeta-Jones, and I think this is once again where Sean Connery's screen presence really came to light, because despite the age difference between him and Catherine Zeta-Jones, I remember that was a bit of talking point at the time, he still managed to get away with it, primarily because he was Sean Connery. His last recent role was A League of Extraordinary Gentlemen in 2003, based on the comic book property. This was directed by Stephen Norrington, who rose to fame, directed the first Blade movie. And I think overall, this was a very uneven movie, but I think Sean Connery, again, he has a very good presence about him. I know there was a bit of a troubled production behind the screen, a bit of tension between him and the director, but still was, I would say, a satisfactory movie overall. And I think primarily you'd want maybe a better movie to end your career on, but of course at the time he was well into his elderly years at the time and probably felt he could no longer maintain an acting career at his late age. So as I've stated before, he's got a very extensive and multi-layered filmography throughout, and I just think this type of screen legends, this type of screen actor, we really have to appreciate them while they're still with us, because with the nature of the industry and the way things are going on at the moment, of course, the industry is really struggling to cope with the COVID outbreak right now, and we're seeing more entertainment shift more towards streaming and television series. It's going to be very hard to generate another iconic screen legend like your Sean Connery, someone who can really have that compelling screen aura about them and draw you really close to the screen. You know, we really have to appreciate this type of actor while they're still around, because for my personal opinion, it's going to be a very long time before we see the likes of Sean Connery again. So I just think it's very sad to see him pass away. Very tragic news. For me, still the definitive James Bond, despite the fact we've had many good actors play the character over time. But I think a true testament to his own acting career was that he was able to step out of the very famous role of James Bond and still build a massively substantial film career outside of the character. And this is something that many actors have struggled to do, build a really outstanding filmography despite the fact that they're defined by a franchise role. So just a screen legend, a screen icon, a truly unique actor in Sean Connery, and it's very sad to see him pass away. So those are my thoughts on this sad announcement of Sean Connery reaching his ends now at the age of 90 years old. Let me know what you think in the comments below. Are there any films that you feel I haven't mentioned in this video that you think deserve mention? If you would like me to review one of those individual movies, then please let me know. I may do some standout reviews of the recent movies that he's been in, the most standout within his own career. I may go on to do a series of reviews on that in the future, and also just maybe later on do a breakdown of the top 10 performances or the top 15 best performances that he produced throughout his career. But if you have any other suggestions of any other additional content related to Sean Connery that you would like me to contribute towards this channel, then let me know in the comments below and I will do so in the future. But that's it for now on a very sad reflection on a very tragic passing away of one of cinema's truly iconic screen legends without question in Sean Connery, who passes away at 90 years old. Those are my thoughts for now. Take care of yourselves, stay at safe distances, and I will see you very, very soon.